Hello, everyone. This is Summer Sennard with Becker's Healthcare. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Escaping Pilot Purgatory, a framework for scaling agentic AI in healthcare organizations. Before we begin, I'll walk us through a few quick housekeeping instructions. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we will have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access that recording. If at any time you have issues with audio or visuals, just try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box, and we are here to help. With that, I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. Diane Kokotoff, Executive Director of Enterprise Solutions and Automation at Wellstar Health System. Jason Bowie, Head of Healthcare at UiPath. Andrea Marin, VP of Healthcare at Naviant, and Mark Miller, Senior VP of Insurance at Naviant. Thank you all for being here today, and I'll now turn the floor over to Andrea to get us started.
Here's a number worth sitting with for a moment. Healthcare organizations have collectively spent somewhere between 30 and 40 billion on AI in recent years. And yet, 95% report no measurable return on that investment. So the question isn't whether healthcare systems are trying, they clearly are. The question is, why isn't it working? Jason, you work across healthcare systems every day on exactly this problem. In your experience, what's actually driving that gap?
Well, thanks for having me, Andrea, and I'm glad to be here. And thanks for the question. First off, I think there's a ton of excitement and interest is certainly there across the entire healthcare ecosystem, particularly among health systems. They really do understand its potential. And I really think that's great. And we wouldn't expect nothing less at this point in time, right? Given all the innovation and all the information and all the new learnings we're having across the ecosystem. But from what I've witnessed on the ground level with a number of healthcare organizations is that sometimes these organizations are applying AI in areas that just don't have much ROI potential to begin with. And so it's really imperative that we analyze the current state and the to be state where we're applying AI with and be critical to understand what's the realistic ROI that a particular use case can give us over time. I'm also seeing AI applied in smaller pieces and aspects of the full process currently. So because it's still so new to the masses, people are trying to figure out what makes sense for them. And so we're going through this evolution of learning. And most AI investments are point solutions today. Think of the ambient scribes, the chatbots, and the copilots that we're all seeing. They're really solving isolated steps and not necessarily the end-to-end workflows. So to have it be meaningful and have that impact really exist, we need to address the end-to-end process and fill the gaps where AI can really shine. So I've seen high ROI when organizations stop thinking about this in a way that they're looking at it from a where can I try AI, but instead just where is the operational friction and the costs really taking place, and where can AI solve the gaps that we've lived with for decades. So I'd say layer AI on top of the process if you're looking for quick wins and small wins. But to achieve big ROI, you really should embed AI and agents into the end-to-end process and have it orchestrated.
Jason, that distinction about where you put it and whether you're using agents or something else, I think really makes a difference. And I think that is where a lot of the confusion starts. So let's maybe go a level deeper. Most executives that are joining us today have already encountered RPA. And I think most have heard about and probably tried generative or Gen AI. But how would you describe what makes agentic AI different from both of those? And you did just hit on it a minute ago. And why does that distinction matter specifically for our healthcare organizations?
Yeah, the distinction is super important, I think, because we're using the term or the phrase AI pretty broadly,
Yeah.
and there's different interpretations depending on who you talk to, which vendors, which partners you're collaborating with. But in its simplest form, RPA is deterministic, meaning that the automation does exactly what we tell it to. And Gen AI uses probabilistic reasoning. So it's really good at generating content and insights for the individual, and it improves the individual's productivity in many regards. Whereas agentic AI is goal-driven and uses decisions to take actions. As of today, when the public talks about AI, it's generally referring to the Gen AI aspects and offerings in the world. Think of the ChatGPTs, the Geminis, and the various copilots. But in the corporate and healthcare sectors, AI is becoming genericized to really mean agentic AI, taking action and completing a task or a workflow. The key difference between agentic AI and RPA, and of course Gen AI, is that it just doesn't generate an answer, but it takes action. I think that's the key word I'll keep coming back to. It can coordinate across multiple steps and systems and really operate inside a pretty complex environment. And agentic AI really is being governed by a framework that spans across the entire workflow, which is exactly what we need in healthcare, given how highly regulated we are and the complexity and the customization that we've been living with. So at UiPath in particular, we think of agentic AI as automation with intelligence plus control. So we're not replacing RPA by any means. We're simply orchestrating RPA along with AI models, various APIs, and we're keeping the human in the loop. And all of this comes together to work and execute a unified workflow. So just to simplify it for the audience, AI agents in my mind are the brain and RPA are the arms and legs, and the human is still the boss.
Okay, I like that explanation. So Diane, I want to bring you in here because you've actually been through this at Wellstar. You've lived and breathed it. So when you first heard the term agentic AI, what did you think it meant? And what did you then find it actually was once your organization got into your pilot?
Right. So interesting enough, Wellstar actually started down this AI journey before it was popular. So
Right.
we started our journey in 2019 working with a chatbot that was generative AI, right? And everybody kept going, we knew the terminology chatbot and everybody was like, oh, it's a chatbot, it's a chatbot. And then we started putting in the RPA COE and bringing that into play. And how did the RPA connect into the bot? And what was very interesting is as we've gone through this journey, our chatbot now does agentic AI. So it does the generative AI, but it also does the agentic AI. And we've been putting the agentic AI into our RPA process, very much what Jason has said. And for us, that has been a game changer. And it's quite funny because the original one was, oh yeah, that's AI. But it's just giving you an answer. Now they're like, can it basically do my job for me? So it's quite it's been quite a journey, and it's very interesting to watch the dynamics of people change and their attitudes change towards AI.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. A little further down in the panel, we've got some more questions back about your project, but I'm going to kind of pivot over to talk about kind of where we start with this. So the number one question we hear from health system leaders is simple. Where do I even start? And you just explained where you started. So, but that's exactly what this next section is designed to answer. So before any technology decision gets made, there is a strategic layer within the organization that has to come first. So how do you identify the right processes? How do you prioritize them? And how do you build a business case that holds up when you bring it to the leadership? So Mark, in this section, I'll start with you. When a healthcare leader walks in asking where to begin with agentic AI, what does a practical strategic blueprint or assessment actually look like? And how does it keep organizations from investing in the wrong processes?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Great one. And I'll, build on some of the things that we've already heard here today. And when I think about, the delivery of healthcare, there's really like three legs to the stool. There's the patient and what we would call the member on the payer side. Then there's the provider and the payer. And really the payer is focused on the best collaboration with the provider and the fiscal responsibility. But ultimately, they serve their members and their customer satisfaction is really key to maintaining them long term. So oftentimes when we think about, where do we want to start? It leads with the areas that directly affect the members and their satisfaction. Areas like prior authorization, claims, appeals, and grievances. And then how do we really minimize the friction? I think Jason mentioned it before, is take friction out of these processes to accelerate the business process and make sure it's aligned with that member. So from there, I think about let's not necessarily boil the ocean. So I think we need to keep in mind that we've got this overall picture in view, and that most payers really have an AI governance team and strategy that's in place. Let's identify maybe one area of focus and then explore the use case with kind of a measured approach that proves value specifically, that can then be expanded further across the organization as a whole. So again, with this type of model, trust is built over time, and we think about the areas of focus for the evaluation of AI when we're building out these blueprints. And I think first and foremost is let's educate and assess folks on the first step. Understand where are the stakeholders, and make sure that those stakeholders are aligned. We're going to document those tasks and then evaluate kind of the decision-making process. From there, we move to the second step and really run some workshops to validate and then rank those automation opportunities. But ultimately, we're providing a roadmap of prioritized use cases and really value statements that are aligned with the operating model recommendations that we're going to make. So now that blueprint is really, lockstep with the strategic initiatives of the organization. And again, the member is at the center of focus here in that case.
Hey, thanks, Mark. That's great information. Jason, let's talk about what has to be true before that proof of concept can succeed. So, Mark's talked about, how we blueprint and roadmap things out, but let's talk about the proof of concept and what it takes to succeed in that, and how do you build the use case prioritization framework, and what does an organization need to have in place before the work even starts?
Yeah, I appreciate the question here. I'd say it all starts with mindset of the organization, top down, side to side. I think we all in the industry need to get comfortable with AI being a part of the future state in our industry. And I'd say it's important that the participants of the proof of concept and the various stakeholders that are involved are truly bought in from the get-go. And they should want to see it succeed and want to see the opportunity and the proof of concept be truly transformational for their organization, and understanding the potential it has on the patient and the member, and all the various stakeholders involved. But more tactically, I'd say you need clear process clarity before even starting. Understand current state. Just don't assume how the process works and how it worked previously. Our healthcare processes have evolved and changed quite a bit over time. So we need to re-examine and study the current state thoroughly. And then I'd say we should all create a value hypothesis on the use case that we're looking at or planning to work on. Tie your assumptions and goals to KPIs that are meaningful to your organization. Everyone's objectives are different. There's not a one size fits all, so you have to do that self-study. But in general, the key themes that I see my customers thinking through and working on is around cost reduction, as well as improving the speed and turnaround times that a process can have. And then the quality of that process and its outcomes are improving over time. So as you're prioritizing areas to pilot, look for high volume areas that have a repeatable element to them and that are more complex in nature. So processes that typically have multiple systems or touch points or business units involved. A couple of areas that just come to mind right now is probably prior auth submission, denials handling of that, as well as claim submissions and claims denial management, or any regulatory or operational audit areas are probably good candidates for proof of concepts today with agentic automation. And we often have to remind ourselves that many of the healthcare processes we operate within today were designed with humans at the center because we just didn't have an alternative. But the type of work in these processes were really not meant for humans to begin with. So organizations should be mindful of all that, and then also select use cases and pilot where they can see the most potential and impact amongst some of their core processes.
Okay, all great points. Thank you. Diane, back over to you. So you've lived this decision. piloted it and brought it to the organization, to a team to, vet it all out. So kind of walk us through, how did your organization determine which workflows to pilot first? What criteria mattered most to you all? And then were there workflows that you seriously considered but ultimately ruled out for one reason or another?
Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like Jason has already stolen my thunder because a lot of what he has said, we did. But that's good because that means we're all following the same pattern that ends up to success, right? So for us, we did. We tried to find the repeatable product that seemed to have the most pain for the most number of people. By finding those different processes, and Jason said it. I mean, coverage discovery, prior auth, indexing. These are currently in the healthcare very, very manual processes that we pour tons of people. I mean, we had in a coverage discovery, we had 30 something people working on looking up coverage, something that a bot can do quite easily.
Yes.
So things like that are what we were looking for when we were picking our pilot. When we talk about criteria, we did start looking at how much time does it take to complete the task? How many tasks are involved actually in the process? Is it a repeatable process? How often is the process completed? What's the complexity of it? And then, of course, on the technical side, do we have the ability to connect to that system? And what does the data look like? If you can't answer these questions in a manner that says, yeah, these are all repeatable. Yes, this doesn't require a cognitive decision. And yes, our technical capabilities are there. You do not have a good use case for a pilot. So for us, absolutely, we had many, many initial processes that we completely ruled out because of these reasons, right? And a lot of times, believe it or not, it was because the data itself wasn't AI ready. The beautiful thing about the new technology, you know, coming back from when we were in, doing it in 2019 to now, with the advent of some of the great LLMs that are out there available for the healthcare industry, you can use those agents. And I mean, I absolutely agree with Jason's point of when you're building this and you're building your pilot, you want to include those agents that have those AI capabilities to bring it together in a very concise workflow.
Oh, absolutely. And Diane, one more question for you. One of the themes that we hear most often is that pilot or proof of concept, that it never scales. So what, in your experience, are some of the most common signs that the pilot has stalled in purgatory? And what has to change, both culturally or operationally, to move towards enterprise deployment?
Yes. Happened to us too. Very, very a common issue with everybody's super excited about the pilot, you get it going, and then it stalls.
Yeah.
And at least for us, I think one of the reasons for the stalling was more of a cultural decision, and it was the inability to have it 100% accurate. So our stakeholders felt it had to be an all or nothing experience. But now we've learned through building, multiple processes that it's really about training your stakeholders to say it's not necessarily an all or nothing. You have to shift their expectations from what is good versus the what is perfect. You can put the man in the middle. In fact, right now we're building a sleep study automation with on UiPath with Naviant,
Yeah.
and in that we've built a UI interface to compensate for when we know we need that human intervention that cannot be automated. And
Right.
so allowing these workflows to continue and accommodate them, to get away from that perfect scenario. And now we become practically perfect.
I like that practically perfect because there are so many times in which we're 99% there, 95% there with the automation, but we still do need a little bit of human in the loop in that
Right.
to make it flow, just like you said, the way healthcare is complex. So, well, before we move to architecture, I want to make sure that we address the room. Most of the leaders here aren't just evaluating technology, they're also building a case internally. So, Mark, question for you is how do you build confidence in your process before you have proof? And then what does it take to get leadership buy-in at that early stage?
Yeah, great question. And, of course, I think engaging with an organization like Navient, I'm going to brag a little bit. That's just table stakes for the conversation. We've got, 600 customers where we've helped automate their processes for the past 40 years. But really, when it shifts to the leadership buy-in, and it's been the theme that we've talked about here the whole time. It's really the value that it will bring to the organization. Diane talked about the time to complete. Is it a repeatable task? Is your data AI ready? And how do we demonstrate that we understand the process and then can build those success criteria like Diane just mentioned as well. From there, in our world, it really comes down to building a pilot or POC that really includes their sample data and the documents, so that you get initial buy-in. Like, okay, I'm just not using some random information. I'm using your data. It's a checkpoint to show that automation can be accomplished within your process. After that, I think as I mentioned, value, building out a detailed value statement or ROI for solving that problem is critical. And, when I build an ROI calculation for our customers as well, the last portion of the calculation is really the cost of doing nothing. Right. So it's like, yes, we know we want to solve this problem, but do we have the fortitude to get through making this change? And oh, by the way, we understand the value. So if we don't, I think that's one of the pieces that my customers tell me is really critical in the discussions they're having internally. So I'm helping those internal stakeholders build that internal story for why they should tackle the problem now, and then make sure it's aligned, obviously, with their strategic initiatives overall.
Hey, no, that's great. Do you have any specific customer example you would want to share?
Yeah, I can't share specific names. I'm working with a large payer right now. I think Diane mentioned she had 30 folks in a process that were checking some information. They actually have 120 people that are simply sorting paper as it comes into their mailroom and then indexing data off of the documents that we expect to automate nearly 95% of that process. So, the value proposition for them is well over $10 million in the next 5 years, and then I can back into the fact that, hey, let's get this problem solved now because it's costing you, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars every month that you don't solve that problem. So lots of examples that I'm talking with folks about this problem every single week. So lots of examples.
Okay, thank you. So most health systems, as we know, they're not starting from that clean slate, right? They have an EHR, they've got existing RPA deployments, they've got point solutions layered on top of each other, and in many cases, they've got workflows that are still running on fax. So I like to say healthcare is keeping the fax alive. So let's talk about what a realistic technical foundation actually looks like when you're building in that environment. So Jason, let's concentrate on the architecture side. For a health system that already has RPA in production and an EHR and a handful of the existing point solutions, what does a realistic enterprise architecture look like? And where does agentic AI fit in rather than maybe replace what's already there, especially if they're hesitant to replace everything at once?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and one that I think a lot of CIOs, CTOs, chief AI officers across the industry, both in the payer and provider space, are asking their teams because we need to rationalize the technology ecosystem and account for AI, but do so in a way that's efficient. And so as we're guiding our customers through this journey, we're letting them know that the AI architecture should really overlay the business process and leverage what you can that's already in place today. We should really avoid duplicating capabilities in our ecosystem or not leveraging prior investments that we've made in the past, 5 years that are proven to already work for us. So in the architecture, keep the system of record intact and don't touch that if you don't have to. Have an orchestration layer that invokes tasks and executes steps across the process. And as of now, I encourage the industry to maintain a human in the loop experience in the solution architecture so that the humans can still be validators. And it's really important that we build confidence among our workforce and understand and give them the visibility that's really needed at this point. And there's a lot of agents out there that are being developed from core admin systems and various EHR platforms. Organizations should look to leverage those wherever they see best fit, but ensure that they're still being orchestrated across the entire workflow to accomplish the goal that you set out on.
So going a little deeper on that, would you dive a little deeper into the orchestration layer, maybe into some what data readiness looks like and what their governance structure needs to look like to support the deployment at scale?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. With regards to integration itself, I just don't think you can rebuild integrations that you already have for every single use case that you want to apply AI to. It's not scalable, and it becomes hard to maintain. So leverage APIs where available and continue to use UI automations where necessary. There's still a number of use cases in our ecosystem that requires UI automations. With regard to data itself, since the technology's come so far, from what I've seen, perfect data isn't always required to apply agentic AI towards. It's of course preferred. We want the best and the cleanest data. But as long as the AI agent has access to the source of truth and the right context, and it can properly be governed and managed, it can really operate successfully in a lot of different scenarios. And when it comes to governance, it's really critical that we focus on that. And I think healthcare has done a fantastic job of brainstorming a perfect governance model, and it's different for every organization. But within that governance framework, we need to really account for the auditability, have real controls in place that prevent incorrect decisioning that could impact the patient or member. And I think healthcare in general is doing a great job at creating these governance frameworks and being really detailed about it and super methodical. And they're always really accounting for all aspects that we need to be mindful as we deploy these new capabilities. So I encourage the industry to just continue to do what they're currently doing, but be nimble, right? Be ready for when there's new capabilities or new changes to our AI world, and have their governance really account for it, and be flexible to change over time.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Mark, how does the architecture question shift when you move from the provider side to the payer side? And what do you find to be the highest stake integration points on the payer side?
Yeah, great question. And I touched on some of them briefly already, but I'll dive just a little bit deeper and get a little bit more granular. Obviously we're worried about security because we've got sensitive data, PHI and PII, that's of utmost importance. But then we're integrating with some of the ingestion points for incoming documents and data. So think about that mailroom process, whether it's physical or electronic. We oftentimes are talking about the automation of intelligent document capture, automated indexing, so to speak. And that's really the start of many of the discussions that we're having. But then from there, as Jason has mentioned, that orchestration of data and the workflows really follows quickly to kind of validate the data that we've captured against maybe member data. Or oftentimes passing it into kind of a case management solution that's going to also utilize that human in the loop validation of the agents that have been recommended. So ultimately, once we get through some of those processes with workflow, we're going to coordinate the passing of that information into downstream adjudication systems and really document repositories. So run the gamut there from, ingestion points to endpoints as well.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And Diane, let's ground all of this with your actual experience. So share with us, if you would, what your first deployment looked like in practice. What was the scope, the timeline, and how did you know it was heading in the right direction?
Yes. So actually, our first major deployment was truly an expansion of one of the pilots that we did to actually decide if we wanted to go down this route of RPA and automation. And what we built was a coverage discovery for Georgia Medicaid, Medicare. And we started the bot as a pilot in the 2019 just to evaluate RPA software, see how it connects to an external site, capturing information. And that, of course, was very successful. But then COVID hit, right? And like every other healthcare system in America, we found the number of visits for uncompensated care, it just skyrocketed. And we were inundated with trying to identify coverage and try to get recoup some of those expenses. And so what we did was we brushed off the bot, we hardened it, and by mid 2020, we had it running 24 hours a day. It's very successful, still running today. And the cash flow that we receive is substantial. And what the advantage of that has been is it really has allowed the reassignment of FTEs to work on higher level work, such as resubmissions or adjustments, rather than doing the manual work. And I will tell you, during COVID, that was a lifesaver because people were, mentally not in the best state. And so being able to take mundane work off their plate and give them something of value was a life changer.
Hey, that is great. You've had some great success with that, and I'm glad to hear that. So we're going to continue on and talk about some continuous optimization. So a pilot that goes live without a feedback loop, we know will plateau. That's just the reality. So the difference between a proof of concept and an enterprise-wide deployment isn't really the technology. It's the system that is built around it to learn, to adjust, and to expand. This is also where the workforce question has to be answered honestly. And Diane, I know you just kind of touched on that. But so let's talk about this a little deeper. So Diane, this question is back to you. So what does an organization need to measure after the go live to know whether a deployment is producing real results versus just running?
Yeah, and I think, Andrea, that is a very important topic of, you can run a bot, but you really want to make sure that it's providing you those results. And Jason actually touched on it also, said, when you're developing a pilot and thinking about what that use case is going to be, you really must consider what is the ROI? What are those KPIs that you are trying to measure? For us, that is a key piece that we do during discovery and development. So we will work with our stakeholders. We will do time studies to ensure we know what is the process truly being, not just an anecdotal, oh, it takes a long time. Well,
Right.
how much is a long time, right? And so we will use that information along with the bot processing time, numbers of runs, average salary for that skill level of work to help calculate the ROI. And we've been actually capturing this data. We have it put into a big SQL database, and we have a Power BI dashboard that's on top of it. So that's available on demand. And that allows us to be able to identify what those real results are. The next level of results is, and Jason, I think you also touched on this, which is how does it enhance or upskill? So there's definitely, everybody knows we can say automation is going to give back time. But what does it do from the human element? And so for us, we really like to go back after a couple of months to the automation and work with the team and say, did it allow you to do different work? Have you been able to shift into more value add work? And are you happier? And that is a key point, I think, that a lot of people forget when they're building their automations.
Oh, I think that's a great point. Yeah, excellent. So, Jason, once an organization has a workflow deployed and performing, how do you expand to multiple workflows without rebuilding that foundation each time?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'd say that the industry as a whole is pretty early on in the adoption phase, and it's really happening at a much faster rate than we probably could have ever imagined. So we'll need to be thinking about and plan for reusability, which is a key word. As we're architecting our solutions, designing them, we need to think in such a way that we can leverage as much of it as possible for future workflows and use cases. So just to give an example, I think eligibility checks happen across a number of workflows in the health systems and payers today for various use cases. So we should build those agents to be reusable and have them easily integrated for future use or applications. And in order to expand to multiple workflows and then scale, we need to think of this as a platform strategy more so than just individual series of projects out there. And I would also encourage the industry to look at the existing automations you've already invested in and built over time, right? None of that is throwaway. Those robots are now becoming tools, reliable tools for your agents to leverage to complete a task successfully. So when you think of scalability, look back to what you already have as a launch pad.
No, Jason, I think that's great. I know I've got a client right now who is was a DU client who now we're putting out on the IXP platform. So we're kind of transitioning everything that's been built where it all points to in the back end, but just changing up the actual, framework and foundation of what's going to be deployed from this point forward. So still rebuilding with that same foundation as you mentioned. So, Diane, back to you. What changed operationally at Wellstar after your initial deployment went live? Then what did you build into the process early that you're glad you did? And what do you maybe wish you would have approached differently?
Yeah. So I think our first major development I talked to you about was the coverage discovery.
Mhm.
I think what changed operationally, the rev cycle team was able to lift and shift. They absolutely were upskilled to the point of several months later they didn't focus on any of that coverage discovery. It actually wasn't even a thought in their world anymore. They went to Epic and they had all of the data in their queue, and they worked from the queue to manage the exceptions, which were maybe a resubmission or additional information, or
Right.
they missed information. So from an operational perspective, it had a very positive effect on that team. What did we build early in the process? Well, we really did focus a lot on the architecture and the technical side of the house. I think though, like to Mark's point when he was discussing, what about the workflow and the integrations and all of the orchestration? We might have missed some of that at the very beginning, right? We were very focused in the technical. I'm going to follow this pattern exactly as it stands, and it it didn't enable us to get or to have more flexibility, right? Which we've since changed, right? And we've learned that lesson. But I think that is something that if I could have done differently, I would have. Things that worked really well was not so much a technical process, but how I managed the RPA team. We built a marketing program around ourselves. So we considered ourselves as a COE/business. And, while we were not a true business or not a,
Right.
a P&L, but we did consider ourselves a marketable business, and we would go and sell our services to the different departments. And so we learned very quickly how to market ourselves to get the processes.
I really like that approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it works well.
Yeah, yeah. I would think it would and keep you building more and finding more processes in the different departments and allowing your team to expand, AI across the organization, which is excellent. So, well, I want to close on something that we promised in the session description. We told attendees that they would hear how organizations are redesigning roles with AI and not just processes. So, Diane, how has that truly played out at Wellstar? And how did you go about having conversation with those people whose roles were changing significantly due to the AI?
So at Wellstar, we definitely focused on the upskilling of all of our team members with AI in mind. Um, we have invested in AI for our leaders. We've included it in our leader training. We have actually put AI in the provider arena, and they've embraced it, helping them to reduce their pajama time, which has been significant. Uh, we've created a new enterprise architecture group. So that was interesting because we took people from various areas of infrastructure and said, I know that you're a technical SME. Now I want you to think of it as a much higher level and think of it from the enterprise perspective. And everything has AI in it. So you have to focus on those AI components and evaluate the solutions with that in mind and understanding where we can take where this could replace maybe a legacy app. We created an AI council. So again, we took people from different areas in the team and said, you are now on the AI council. And we upskilled them, a lot of senior analysts, data team members, and had them taught them how to create agents and bots and said, you have to understand and learn all of the different products out there and understand the risks and be able to now counsel the enterprise architecture team on AI and what this means. And actually, interesting enough, everybody has embraced this. I think that people have actually willingly moved over to these positions because they do realize that you have to start embracing AI or you will become redundant. So we haven't had any negative effects from that.
Okay, that is great and some good nuggets and takeaways for our audience there. So I think we are through, kind of what our prepared questions and dialogue were, in which I wanted to make sure that we covered, and I asked each of you. I do believe that we're going to take some questions from the audience at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Andrea. So I do
Yeah.
want to thank Diane and Jason and Mark as well for a wonderful discussion today. And we will now begin today's question and answer session. So, audience, please feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A box that you see on your screen. First question we have here is for both Andrea and Mark. For organizations that have tried automation before and felt burned, what's your advice for rebuilding internal confidence based on your work with Navient's customers?
I'll start if you don't mind, Andrea, and turn it
That's
over
fine.
to you. I have to say, Diane, I loved the message you shared earlier about upskilling that provides pajama time. That's a new one that I haven't used before, but I'm going to, and I think it kind of feathers into what I want to state here is that you have to make sure that the stakeholders that are involved understand what I call the why. Why is this important? Why are we making this change? And then I think a really strong change management strategy is absolutely critical. This is oftentimes way more important than any of the technology decisions that are being made. We've got to make sure that the business users as well as the technology team are engaged in this so that everyone feels heard. And that's really key to success. And I think the change management strategy comes from, different leadership within the organization. And that story has to be told time and time and time again, almost until the leaders are worn out from telling the story, but it really does help the transition become much more easier, and focus on this upskilling pajama time that Diane, I just love that comment. Andre, you have anything to add there?
Sure, I do. So I kind of liken it to the early days of the EHR. So I had the privilege of installing one of the first EHRs as a nurse, and was pulled to IT. And I just think back to those days, and it was challenging and it was tough. And maybe, a few years later, we did a rip and replace, right? Because that's what everyone did back then. This would have been in like the late 90s. And so I kind of take that analogy and I say to my clients, if you've tried, some automation and it hasn't worked, if you put in some RPA, or you've tried some Gen AI, let's talk about maybe why it didn't work, but let's also talk about the fact that you can build on what didn't work by going back and correcting that. And I think just the knowledge that our team brings out to our customers, and the deep knowledge across the platforms, and the orchestration level really brings some confidence into our customers that we do know. We've been in their shoes. Most of us have spent years in healthcare systems before we were out in this world. And so I do think that resonates well. And I've gotten a lot of head nodding and agreement with my analogy, like, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We didn't with the EHRs back in the day, so let's not do it with automation today.
Amazing. Thank you both for your insights there. Next question we have is for Jason. What's a realistic timeline from readiness assessment to a pilot that produces measurable results?
Yeah, good question. A difficult one to answer because it varies so much. But with the advent of AI as a whole, we're seeing development really be accelerated and take much less time as compared to our legacy world. Think of your app dev or your basic enhancements that typically occur on big, large systems. So that's promising. But when it comes to piloting AI in general, I think it really depends on the use case. I've seen low to medium complexity use cases be deployed within 4 to 6 weeks and starting to show value right from day one, post go live, which is great to see, and it's exciting. It gives us real-time feedback. And I'd say the measurable results probably take 12 weeks or so, a few months for us to get an ample amount of sample data and results to then compare and analyze. But for the higher complexity use cases that have a lot of AI agents involved or a lot of different LLMs and automations that need to be strung together, can probably take anywhere between 10 to 20 weeks to build and adequately test before really deploying it into production. But what's game changing is, again, how fast we can pilot now. We're tackling opportunities and challenges that would have taken us several months or years even to deploy something like this. So we're going to be able to do so much more in a short period of time going forward. And we all should be really excited about the implications of this towards healthcare.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jason. And we have time for one more question here. So this one is for you, Diane. How do you handle conversations with frontline staff whose workflows are being redesigned without worrying them because of AI?
Yes. So this is actually change management, like Mark was talking about. You cannot disregard change management. So for us, as part of our development, we work with those frontline workers so that they feel empowered and that they feel part of the process. We explain what the bot will do, and more importantly, what the bot won't do. And that has led to a much better adoption rate. Additionally, we always clearly address any security concerns at the beginning of development. And absolutely, like Mark said, we are constantly reminding them throughout the process, what it's doing, what it's not doing, that it's secure, to make sure that they have that level of confidence in the bot.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diane. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. So I want to thank Diane, Jason, Andrea, and Mark for an excellent discussion, as well as Navient for sponsoring today's webinar. One quick note that our speakers would love to hear from you, so feel free to reach out to any of our speakers from today's discussion using the contact information you see on your screen. They are happy to help you through your AI journey. And we'd like to thank you all for joining us and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.